Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and you know what? I'm tired. My last couple of countdowns have been giant endeavors that took way longer to produce than I expected. And quite frankly, I'm pooped. So I kinda wanted to do something shorter and dumber to give myself a brief brain break. And with these big projects looming over me, it's way too easy to say screw it and waste hours on repetitive runs of roguelikes. And one particular roguelike that really struck a chord with me was Skul the Hero Slayer. And hey, look at that! It's Halloween. I'm gonna go ahead and run with this. A while back, my fellow Countdown creator and living chandelier, Wambu, released a video about Skul the Hero Slayer, a great video by the way, that inspired me to give the game a try. Dozens of hours later, I'm now a full-blown Skul fan, and decided to ride this wave of inspiration by stealing the concept of Wambu's video entirely. Thank you for that, Wambu, no takebacks.
Alright, I'll allow it, but only if you use it for the power of good, you eight-legged lout!
I shall do my best to fulfill my Countdown creator duties, sir. Skul the Hero Slayer is a 2D retro-style roguelike developed by Southpaw Games. You play as this skeletal rapscallion as he fights through waves of good guys to save the Demon King from the clutches of good. It also has beautiful pixelated visuals and on-point sound design, but don't let the cartoony art style and pandering references fool you. This game is tough, and challenge is the real meat on these bones. Credit to Southpaw Games for providing us with something so cute and yet so brutal. More to the point, our titular hero, Skul, has the ability to remove his head and put on new ones, granting him the abilities of different warriors and adventurers throughout the land. There are more than 30 skulls total, and each one has a different playstyle and flavor, so finding a skull you can wrap your head around is paramount to mastering the game. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, including what items to buy, which quintessence to use, what sort of passive buffs you want to build up, etc. I'll bring those up if relevance allows it, but make no mistake, the focus for today are those compelling craniums. And one more big thank you to Wambu, not only for inspiring this list with a video that you should totally watch, but also for gifting me the game. He literally made this video possible. So, love what you do, Wambu, keep being awesome.
You got it, friendo.
And with that, let's set out for adventure. These are my top 10 favorite skulls from Skul. My top 10 skulls? My top 10 Skul the Hero Slayer skulls? Yeah, let's go with that one. So something to point out before we get into the first entry is that there are 3 different categories of skulls in this game. Power skulls are all about the heavy damage, but are slow to move. Speed skulls are all about the movement and attack speed, and balance skulls are the happy marriage between the two. Which one you lean towards heavily depends on your playstyle, but for me, it turns out that I strike a good balance. The list having 4 power skulls, 4 speed skulls, and 2 balance skulls. Foreshadowing. With that said, let's kick this list off with the first speed skull. I didn't think much at first of Stone Monkey's skull. It starts out pretty weak, just a little stick-swinging simian with a serviceable 3-hit combo. But you probably already see where this is going. A monkey with a staff that knows martial arts. Gee, I wonder who that could be. Well, hold on to your bones because it gets better. Actually, no, don't hang on to your bones. Give your bones to Arachne to upgrade your skulls from common to rare to unique and finally legendary. And Stone Monkey's upgrades are something special. As base Stone Monkey, you can spawn these shadow clones based on a meter that will attack any enemies nearby after a delay, and the upgraded Monkey King gains a significant upgrade to both the clones and his special abilities. Upgrading to the unique Immortal King grants him access to a second special ability, and the clones will now mimic Stone Monkey's basic attacks. And then, upon reaching the legendary Overlord Skull, the clones will mimic his basic attacks and special moves, significantly increasing his damage output and field presence. So, yeah, you're basically playing as Sun Wukong, decimating hordes of enemies and clowning on boss fights with those clones of his. You can even optimize it further since the Overlord Stone Monkey rides into battle on a flying Nimbus upon swapping in, leaving behind even more clones. It does take some practice to take full advantage of this saintly simian, but good delegators can maximize their monkeys to kick some serious tail. I am going to admit though, a big part of my enjoyment for this skull is just the Journey to the West theming. That top 10 versions of Sun Wukong countdown is becoming more plausible by the day.
お前はもう死んでいる。 NANI?!
Samurai Jack, Afro Samurai, Haomaru. What did these characters all have in common? That's right, they're all dead, and with their bones, I have copied their prowess. While you studied the blade, I waited for you to die. Now I'm the samurai!
There can only be one samurai.
Well, actually, most modern depictions of samurai are actually Ronin. Thank you, Gaijin Goomba, love your stuff. But whatever, samurai are cool, and so is a samurai skull. What you see is what you get here. A disciplined swordmaster complete with jingasa, kimono, and sheath blade that is only drawn to unleash swift strikes and devastating slashes. Obviously a nod to the popular yaijutsu style of swordplay. Samurai is great for racking up damage in the most basic way possible, but what sets him apart from other speed skulls is the single slash ability. Upon activation, single slash sends the samurai forward, freezing any enemies his blade comes into contact with, only for him to inflict a gross amount of damage upon sheathing his weapon. So, yeah, it's the classic swing your blade and your opponent hangs there for a moment before their inevitable decapitation! And if that's not enough damage, you got Sammy's passive that tags enemies with these blade counters. The more counters you have, the more damage single slash deals when you line up that perfect Kurosawa finisher. Combining speed and power, Samurai can be both an effective rune clearer and a devastating boss buster. Especially when upgraded to Neo Samurai, where the single slash basically just turns into Baiken's instant kill from Guilty Gear. If I had to pick one gripe with Samurai, it's that his appeal kind of wears off after you use him a few times. Aside from the single slash, the Samurai doesn't have much in the way of variety. His other abilities don't really offer anything either except, well, more damage. At the same time though, that just means he's a case of simple but brilliant, something that you'll notice a couple more times later on the list. Would I include him in top 10 Samurai if I ever did that list? Probably not, but he's at least worth consideration. What's with me and trusting clowns lately? One of the first skulls I gravitated to was Ninja for its zippy, stabby gameplay. In fact, I was pretty surprised it didn't make it onto Wambu's list. Well, it almost did, but Wambu had to be a doofus and dropped Bomber in at number 10. I can't say I understand Wambu's love for explosive one-note malarkey.
I mean, have you tried it?
Yes, and all I got out of it was a huge mess and gunpowder up my nose. But to my own surprise, I ended up dropping Ninja from my own list as well because of this cadaverous cranium contained within a clown's crown.
So who's the doofus now?
Still you, but I never said I wasn't a doofus myself. Clown Skull is basically Ninja, except more fun. In fact, once upgraded, he becomes one of the most potent damage dealers in the game. He's a speedy zoner with a plethora of knives as his basic attack, and his abilities are mainly just new and creative ways to turn your enemies into pincushions. The twist on this zoner subtrope is his passive. As he doles out the daggers, he causes these knife markers to appear on his enemies. Tag someone with 3 markers and they'll be dealt a burst of magic damage. Then it resets their counter to 0 for an encore performance. And with how many daggers this guy is juggling around, that's gonna happen a lot. It makes Clown Skull one of the rare hybrid skulls in the game. Whether you focus your items on physical damage, magic damage, or both, Clown Skull adapts to the situation. And oh lord, these upgrades! Piero's Skull is a straight up numbers boost, but once upgraded to Joker Skull, your abilities get a significant power up worthy of its villainous namesake. Plus, I just really love the aesthetic of this guy. That whole clown countdown I did a while back really gave me a lot of respect for these giggly goofy goobers. I genuinely love Bass Clown's silly little waddle, Piero is adorable on his unicycle, and Joker's Skull looks so badass in the most ridiculous way. Clowns are all about making you smile and having fun, and I gotta say, Clown Skull accomplished that in spades. And knives. Actually, mostly just the knives. That's 3 speed skulls in a row so far, and that's pretty consistent with how I usually tackle action-based roguelikes. I tend to favor mobility and evasion, moving about the environment and avoiding attacks as much as possible while taking whatever shots I can at the enemy. This next entry follows that in a very similar, icy vein. Frost Skull, ice to meet you. I'm just gonna accept my fate knowing that ComicFoil is going to fill this entire segment with ice puns, so here we go. Unlike Samurai and Clown, Frost is a balanced skull, not speed, but it still provides that evasion edge in a very different, very chill way. First off, every one of Frost's skills inflicts the freezing property on the enemies, which gives you a chance to reposition yourself, get some free damage in, or avoid the avalanche of trouble around you. But what's even cooler, Frost's skills have nearly zero windup to use. Nearly sub-zero windup. You press the button, and before you know it, that attack was called off for a snow day. So even though you're not a speed-based skull, you've retained that evasion by making everything around you slower. Oh hey, you're trying to hit me? Nope, freeze. Hey you, with the sword, freeze. Oh hey, you in the back.
I know. Freeze.
But just because you can create icebergs doesn't mean you're as slow as one. Freezing Field is a pretty great area of effect attack in addition to, you know, more freeze. But the best move in Frost's kit actually involves you not moving at all. With Hibernation, you can become immobile and invincible while every enemy that touches you
No! Where did it go?
Yeah, no joke, I originally had Frost way higher on this list, but the latest patch of the game made quite a few changes to Frost Skull that really cooled my jets. The loss of Hibernation is one thing. It was a great way to get your bearings and wait out certain attacks from big enemies or bosses that you otherwise might not have been able to avoid. Interestingly enough, it was moved to his swap skill in addition to the icicles that he shoots out in all directions. I mean, I'm glad they managed to keep it in his kit, but it definitely feels like the refrigerated leftovers of his previous on-command skill. They also added some windup to a couple of his abilities, meaning that Frost Skull feels much slower compared to before. Be that as it may, he did get some neat new tricks to compensate. Freezing Field feels even more impactful, especially once you upgrade to Frozen Soul. You can do some cheesy zoning with the Iceberg skill, and yeah, I admit, Glacial Blade and Glacial Charge are definitely excellent additions to his Ice Cold arsenal. So yeah, Frost Skull's appeal has melted a bit for me in that last patch, but it's still a winner in my book. Okay, what? That doesn't even... Oh, like winner.
Comic, you're fired!
So remember how Ninja Skull got snuffed out because of how much I fell in love with Clown Skull? Well, unfortunately, I have to sing the same eulogy for Yaksha Skull. I had Yaksha Skull at number 10 in my original draft, and even though it got pushed out, I still love it a lot. It hits super hard, has some fun heavy attacks, and its Buddhist deity transformation remains one of my favorite abilities in the game. So why is it no longer on the list? Well, because the latest update introduced 2 new skulls to the game, and I had to do a little reevaluation. One of them is Mage Skull, which eventually becomes a walking Lord of the Rings reference, and is everything I could want in a magic-based skull. I definitely like it more than Alchemist, that's for sure. Then I took the other new skull for a spin, and... well, my whole list got shanghaied. It wasn't enough just to add a pirate skull to the game, no. They went ahead and added the patron saint of plunder and pillage, Davy freaking Jones. Everything about this Seaborn captain is so unbelievably extra that I fell in love. Y'all had me at ahoy. First of all, that design. It's so extravagant and grandiose that I can't help but be amazed. As for his weapon of choice, you'd think that they'd utilize a cutlass or maybe a flintlock pistol. No. Davy Jones just ripped a whole ass cannon from the hull and is ready to scuttle your butt. Davy's basic attack fires cannonballs forward that do a disgusting amount of damage on hit, and if he has no cannons loaded, he's more than willing to use his massive siege weapon as a bludgeon. Yeah, that's right, Davy Jones has a reload mechanic. He can load up to 4 cannonballs at a time, and every 4th reload will tap into his special reserves, empowering the cannonballs for even more desolation. This leads right into his abilities. None of Davy's skills activate immediately. Instead, he loads them as special ammunition, causing the corresponding basic attack to be infused with said ability. At the ready, summons skeletal marksmen that fire towards the point of impact, bombs away activates a cannon barrage, lowers the anchor really fast, and my personal favorite, prepare for boarding, which calls upon skeletal pirates to self-destruct on contact with the enemy. He just might be the most potent physical skull in the entire game. How could it get any better? Well, you remember that enhanced reload mechanic I mentioned earlier? Yeah, they can apply to the ability cannonballs, making them even more batshit insane. Even his swap skill is over the top. Not only does it automatically load 2 cannonballs for you, he summons a goddamn lightning storm that can hit enemies for 10 seconds. So if Davy Jones is this good, why only number 6? Well, this could just be me trying to curb my recency bias, but by that same notion, I just haven't had the chance to play this skull enough to appreciate it fully. Additionally, if I had one complaint, this skull is mega slow with few mobility options. Though there is some tomfoolery you can do with the aerial attack. Though irksome as that may be, yo ho, a pirate's life is truly for me. Or a pirate's death anyway. I'm starting to realize that previous countdowns I've done are really influencing my choices here. Well, to put it more accurately, I usually pick countdown topics about things that I like to begin with, and making said countdowns makes me like that topic even more. So when Skul the Hero Slayer decides to play with one of those same tropes, like say, necromancy, I'm reminded of all the other necromancers that I like from other games like Yorick or Jewel. Does this mean I have a fascination with death, or is Gravedigger Skull just really cool? Likely both. Gravedigger takes some time to get going, a big lumbering power skull with a slow, hefty basic attack and no skills immediately available. But if you look to your left, you'll see dead people. Striking these phantasmagorical wanderers causes graves to spawn, from which our resurrectionist can summon undead minions named after the works of William Shakespeare, which got Comic really excited when I told him that part. Hamlet whacks enemies with his club, Macbeth slams the ground to create shockwaves, Othello causes spears to spring up like daisies, and King Lear throws these iron balls at long range. Each of these 4 Skelebuddies are very useful, and who you prefer really depends on your playstyle.
So are you going to rank them individually?
What? No, there's literally no reason to do that.
Exactly.
Fine. Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, King Lear.
There you go. Now, was that so hard?
Moving on. Save for Hamlet, who more often than not ends up in a place where he does a whole lot of nothing, the skeletal ensemble grants Gravedigger a remarkable amount of area control, and by the time you upgrade to Savior Skull, you'll be filling the screen with absolute undead viscera. It's a great arsenal that allows Gravedigger himself to focus on what he needs to do to survive, whether that's evading attacks or adding to the DPS with that massive coffin of his. I should mention that Carleon Recruit Skull also summons minions to do his bidding, but Gravedigger's better risk-reward ratio makes me favor him overall. Then there's Rockstar Skull, an honorable mention that possesses just as much if not more area control thanks to his plethora of sound-based attacks, but you need to be much more mindful of keeping Rockstar's music bumping, whereas Gravedigger gets his area control going with the push of a button. I acknowledge that's a me thing, I never really did get a handle on Rockstar's gimmick.
Oh, what a shame. Let me play you the Song of Scrubs on the world's most unremarkable Stratocaster.
Can it, you overpriced dining room appliance? In summary, not only is Gravedigger cool thematically, I think it might be my best skull from a gameplay standpoint. I've beaten the game several times by now, and most of my victories are thanks to Gravedigger. Whenever I see that foreboding hood in the forest, I know for a fact I'm gonna have a good run. I may not be a big horror guy, but fans of mine know that I love monsters and the fantastical lore of mythical creatures that go bump in the night. Skeletons, of course, given this countdown, but also vampires, ghosts, zombies, etc. My personal favorite, though? This one might be an unpopular pick for fellow Skull players because Werewolf Skull is rudimentary. It doesn't have a lot going for it compared to the more complex skulls in the game. It has a fast but generic 2-hit combo, and its abilities are all about rending your enemies asunder, either by tearing them to bits or by dashing through them with lightning speed. But that right there is actually the main thing that draws me to this skull: mobility. Not only is Werewolf Skull fast, 2 of his abilities help close in distances or make quick escapes. There's Hunt, which lets him dash straight through targets and deal a good chunk of damage, but my preferred mobility option is Beast Leap, a mighty lunge that is overall easier to control and you can stack up to 3 uses at a time. Both abilities are very useful though, and only get better with the upgrades from Arachne. This makes Werewolf Skull a potent drive-by attacker, doggedly dashing across the map and leaving piles of body parts where his enemies used to be. You do have to be mindful though. It's an easy set to learn, but you'll have to get creative to get the same use out of these simple abilities as you might with Davy Jones or Frost. I suppose that's part of the charm though. I love a challenge, and I will never resist the opportunity to prove that I can control the savage beast. I will admit that the most recent patch did nerf his damage a bit by removing his ability to bleed enemies. Not entirely sure why they did that, but to be fair, Werewolf Skull was done a lot of favors thanks to the rework of the game's items. Specifically, on-hit effects were given a lot more emphasis this time around, with status effects like bleed, freeze, and stun getting a major buff. Plus the addition of the brand new wound status. Speed Skulls overall love these changes, and with Werewolf Skull's emphasis on attack speed, he became a DPS monster overnight. And that's all aside from his predation ability. Maybe not his best attack, but one I love landing. It's a big frontal bite that heals 1 HP for each enemy he kills with it. 1 HP may not seem like a lot, but in a roguelike, any boost to your health can make a huge difference, making predation a great ability to use in a large crowd, and it does occasionally come in handy against bosses. All in all, Werewolf Skull gives me that viscerally satisfying Saberwolf feel, balancing rapid aggression with situational awareness, bobbing, weaving, and cleaving my enemies to shreds while zipping around with graceful dexterity. He's a simple boy, but he's a good boy. Also, he looks like King from the Owl House, and that just tickles me. In the previous entries, you've heard me stress two strategies, area control and evasion. In any roguelike, I tend to favor builds that let me throw out some chaos and avoid enemies while my damage storm does its thing. Things like Demeter's Call in Hades, or the Huntress's Glaive in Risk of Rain 2. My top 3 skulls also embody these two qualities, and in the case of number 3, it's about diving out of the way with copious amounts of splash damage. There's actually a surprising lack of skulls in this game based around the natural elements. Sure, we have Frost Skull, but there's no Lightning Skull, no Earth Skull, and I think the only use of wind in the whole game is courtesy of the Gargoyle Skull. And fire magic shows up in movesets for the Great Warlock and Mage because every D&D wizard knows you always take Fireball. I guess the devs wanted to be more creative with their themes, meaning that if they were gonna base one skull around something as simple as water, it better be pretty good. And yeah, it's pretty darn good. Once upon a time, the Water Skull was actually considered one of the worst in the roster. From what I am to understand, he could push and pull enemies around, but not much else. But I got into the game after they cleaned up his skill set, so I've only ever known Water Skull as an aquatic crowd-clearing conqueror. That pushing power turned into a heap of blunt damage, and now he's a paragon of horizontal destruction. As Water Skull does damage with his basic attacks, his water meter will fill up, and every time it does, these waves will shoot out and start damaging all grounded enemies they pass through. And they last a good while too, making for efficient wave clearing and wiping the floor with certain bosses as you maneuver with the motion of an ocean. Don't think it's just about the passive either. This hydraulic harrier is augmented with an arsenal of aqueous abilities. Sure, Rising Tide is just a cheap imitation of one of my favorite fighting game characters, but in certain situations, it's a good way to bring the more evasive enemies within range of his surging fists. Then there's Tornado, which adds some verticality to his AoE damage, Dive, which is a great way to avoid attacks and is followed up by a Torrential Blast, and Lake of the Spirit, where you can just do this. Look, if y'all just want to stand there and bear the undertow, that's fine. I'll be here enjoying my comfy little pool, thank you very much. All of this combined makes Water Skull very useful in almost every situation, especially once you upgrade him to Greek god levels of power. And finally, that design. I guess swimming really is the best form of exercise.
Damn, boy, he's thick!
Pick up this skull and watch your enemy's hopes go down the drain. So far, I've ranked all these skulls not only in regards to fun, but also how well they gel with my playstyle and how objectively viable they are. Of course, I consider all of my picks to be enjoyable, but that's not the main reason that they're ranked here. If I made this list purely on fun factor, I would have ranked Champion Skull or Prisoner Skull somewhere around here, and Clown and Stone Monkey would be much higher. I'll be the first to admit that I'm a tryhard. When I play these games, I play to win. And now I'm going to immediately contradict what I just said, because this next skull wins a silver medal purely because It's just fucking bonkers. Not that I'm a big gambler in real life. I've only ever been to a casino once in my life, and while it was a decently fun time, I prefer to keep my gambling to video games. No, not what I meant. Bad EA. Bad! I'm talking more about my lifelong battle against RNGesus, where I can keep my life savings, and the only thing at stake is the current run. And possibly my own sanity. In the case of the Gambler Skull, this is basing a moveset around RNG, but heavily stacking the deck in your favor. Besides looking like a smooth and suave Bond villain, Gambler Skull proves to be a master of probability, rolling the dice with the lives of his enemies and filling the screen with absolute chaos. From his passive to his abilities to his swap skill, every single one of Gambler's techniques are useful in dealing damage and providing area control. What's more, all of them have a chance to be either super busted or just meh. His basic attack has a 20% chance to throw a Joker card that will explode on contact, and his swap skill spawns a slot machine that will create an on-field effect depending on the result. Then there are his abilities, which is where Gambler Skull absolutely shines. Each one has a 20% chance for insane power and a 10% chance to flop, but failing isn't even all that bad. Blackjack summons a hand of cards that bombard enemies up front, Rain of Darts summons a, well, rain of darts depending on the dice roll, Russian Roulette is a revolver attack that fires a shot forward, and my personal favorite, Roulette of Destiny, which, depending on the color, will spawn a magical effect that absolutely decimates large groups of enemies. Hitting that 20% success rate will amplify these abilities to absolutely devastating levels and will result in some serious gains. So what happens when you hit that 10% fail? The abilities just become mediocre, and even then they're not that bad. You'd think that maybe you'd take some damage or be hit with some sort of negative status effect, but no. A failed gamble simply results in a less potent ability that is easily worked around through items that boost your magic power or reduce your cooldowns. The worst you'll ever experience is maybe the knockback from failing the Russian Roulette, but even that is rarely going to screw you over. Just goes to show that part of being lucky is preparing yourself for when your luck runs out. This is why I have no issues bringing Gambler Skull into the run, and why he's so much fun for me. While his abilities can be unpredictable sometimes, there's no true detriment to playing his game. Whether you roll the dice, hit the slots, or draw the cards, the odds are ever in your favor. The house always wins, and baby, I am the house. Not a huge fan of the magic-based skulls besides Gambler, but Mage comes close. Also, points for being Gandalf. Really awesome and ridiculous skull that I never really got the hang of. Wambu, you play that song for me again, I swear to God! You'd think I'd like this one given my playstyle, but I tend to prefer evasion as opposed to blocking the damage. Still, another example of simple but brilliant. I'm a huge fan of the Ranger archetype, but Hunter is just way too slow and unwieldy for a game like this, which is a shame. Love the idea though. This is the Ranger skull done right, wrapped in a smorgasbord of lunacy. This is a skull I use when I just want to go apeshit. Really neat idea that I genuinely enjoy using. Not a fan of the legendary design though. Honorary number 12. Really fast, really cool, and super fun to use. The quintessential I don't give a fuck skull. Super enjoyable, but I haven't played Dead Cells yet, so the references are lost on me. And yes, I do plan to play it eventually. Leave me alone, North! Started out as arguably the worst skull in the game, but the recent updates have turned this guy into an absolute boss buster. He's growing on me. And here's the honorary number 11. Super cool design, hits like a truck, and the updates were really kind to it. Also, fun fact, all of the skull arts you saw during the number cards are courtesy of Sheikah Arts. Here's our take on Yaksha's skull that would have shown up earlier if it wasn't for Davy Jones, which they were kind enough to do as well. Link to their Twitter in the description, go check them out, they do amazing work. And with that, let's get to number 1. Something cool about making countdowns like these is that you can get a good idea of someone's playstyle and preferences based on how they would rank their favorite of whatever game they're talking about. Favorite Kirby copy abilities, favorite Street Fighter combatants, favorite weapons in Monster Hunter, etc. And when it comes to tackling this game's ruthless runs through the Carleon Kingdom, I'd say my favorite Skulls, gosh that's fun to say, paints the picture of someone who focuses on avoidance while peppering the field with wide-range attacks. There are exceptions, of course, but generally I prefer my craniums to be swift like the Werewolf or Stone Monkey, have wide range and field presence like Gravedigger or Gambler, and have some way to avoid damage like Frost or Water. I just wish there was a single skull that could incorporate a little bit of everything that I like about this game. Ladies and gentlemen, my wish has been granted. First of all, no, that's not a typo. That's actually how it's spelled in the game, don't ask me why. I looked it up and I still have no idea. But that makes about as much sense as Skull himself. Maybe they have a phobia about completed nouns. Anyway, this might seem like a weird number 1 to those who have played Skull the Hero Slayer. Upon first glance, Genie's Skull is pretty straightforward. But he's got quite a few neat tricks hidden in that lamp. The scimitar is the obvious bit, giving Genie's Skull a wide-range 3-hit combo similar to most other weapon-based skulls. He also floats, which means that he won't trigger floor traps. While this does mean that you can't cheese certain fights by intentionally triggering the traps beneath other enemies, anytime I do take damage from these spikes, I keep thinking to myself, man, if only I were Genie. Plus, you can always switch to your other skull if you want to trigger the traps anyway. Then there's his dash, or should I say, teleport. You can't use it to attack like with the other power skulls, but the dash is instantaneous, literally zero startup, sacrificing a little damage output in favor of making Genie deceptively slippery. So far, that's 2 really minute qualities, nothing bombastic like Lake of the Spirit or Rain of Darts. But that's the thing with Genie. This skull is all about the nuance. It's the little details that make Genie, Genie. The same goes for Genie's abilities. All of them are relatively simple at first glance, but you gotta look deeper. His swap skill has him popping out of a lamp, he's got a charging tackle, a big punch, a counter, and a multi-hit sword attack. Basic stuff, right? Well, here's the kicker. Every single one of Genie's abilities grants him a few seconds of invulnerability. Maybe it's not the same level of invulnerability as Water Skull's Dive or Frost Skull's Hibernation, still frosty about that, but with proper timing, every maneuver gives you the potential to dance through the danger. Genie Tackle and Genie Smash are both excellent ways to deal damage in a large area, Genie Lamp is an excellent counter that can save your butt at the best of times, and then there's my personal favorite, Genie Swordsmanship, where Genie's Skull tracks enemies and pops in and out of existence while slashing the opposition to ribbons. Upon upgrading to Apprentice Genie, these abilities get a major size upgrade as well as an even more glorious mustache. Then there's Magnifico, where he unfortunately loses the mustache, but instead transforms into a JoJo reference. And starts cloning himself, literally multiplying his damage output for a truly magical display. It's actually really interesting to me. When you think of genies, you think maybe a spellcaster, someone who floats around and stupefies their foes with phenomenal cosmic powers! Not this guy, though. Skull the Hero Slayer instead goes for the Arabian swordsman archetype. A refined and graceful warrior who uses his power more as a way to dance around his enemies by becoming intangible at the right moment, floating around, using his amorphous form to move to and fro, dazzling his opponents before subjecting them to a lethal performance of sword. A wide area of effect, the ability to skirt around danger, and a level of skill required to master the timing to make the most of this marvelous maestro of magnificence. It's beautiful. What else can I say except... dance, Genie, dance! Number 1 favorite Skull in the game, without a doubt. I'm the Green Scorpion, and thank you, Skull, for providing me with yet another fantastic roguelike to enjoy. And a very special thank you to Wambu for all the inspiration, support, and not suing me for plagiarism.
Love you too, boo.
Give this game a shot, give this channel a sub, and have yourself a very happy Halloween. Later, people!